When they are with you, they're fully in, eyes locked, fully present, making you feel like you're the only one who matters in that moment. And then, without warning, they're gone. Not because they've lost interest, not because they've stopped caring, but because something deep in them knows that getting close is not the same as staying close. So who are these people and why do they do this? Carl Jung, the Swiss psychiatrist who founded analytical psychology, described them as intuitive types. And for Jung, intuition is not just a vague gut feeling or a mystical hunch. It's a distinct cognitive function, the mind's way of perceiving patterns, possibilities, and connections without relying on direct sensory input. As Jung himself explained, intuition is that psychological function which transmits perceptions in an unconscious way. In everyday life, that means they often sense undercurrents others overlook. The mood before it's spoken, the shift before it's visible, the truth before it's confirmed. It's like having a third eye, not for the mystical, but for the invisible patterns shaping what's about to happen. Today, we call these deep intuitives INFJs, INFPs, INTJs, and INTPs, according to the MBTI system. They are the rarest minds in the personality spectrum. And when connection crosses a certain invisible line, they sometimes take a deliberate step back. In this video, we'll explore the 3 main reasons why, and what it really means. Reason 1. The all or none rule. For a deep intuitive, connection is never casual, and I'm not talking about duration, I'm talking about depth. If they open the door, they're already seeing the entire underlying pattern. Your history, your tells, the words you almost said, the energy you carried when you walked into the room. That's the lens of introverted intuition in INFJs and INTJs. It dives straight past the surface into the whole design. For INFPs and INTPs, their auxiliary extroverted intuition still makes them see far more possibilities and nuances than they reveal. That level of presence is powerful, but it's also costly. Depth is not a hobby. It's a full-body investment that demands emotional, mental, and sometimes even physical energy. So when someone moves closer, their mind runs a quiet calculation. Can I sustain this without burning myself out? They're not playing hard to get. They're protecting the connection from collapsing under the weight of its own intensity. In their world, depth is worth it only if it can be kept alive. And sometimes, the only way to keep it alive is to slow it down. But that's just the first layer. The second reason goes beyond energy, into trust itself. Reason 2. They scan and they test. For deep intuitives, closeness is never just an emotional state. It's a high-stakes exchange of trust. Carl Jung once wrote, "The meeting of two personalities is like the contact of two chemical substances. If there is any reaction, both are transformed." And before they allow that transformation, they scan for patterns, for subtle inconsistencies in language, for the tiny fractures between what someone says and what they actually do. For INFPs and INTPs, this filtering runs through their dominant introverted judging function. Introverted feeling for the INFP, introverted thinking for the INTP. Weighing every detail against an internal standard, while their auxiliary extroverted intuition feeds them multiple interpretations and unseen possibilities. For INFJs and INTJs, it's their dominant introverted intuition at work, comparing what they observe to an internally built map of patterns and likely outcomes, refined by their external judging function. Extroverted feeling for INFJs, and extroverted thinking for INTJs. And sometimes they'll intentionally create space, not to punish, not to manipulate, but to see what happens when they're not pulling the connection forward. Will the other person step in on their own? Will they meet depth with depth, or only stay engaged when the intuitive is carrying the weight? The step back, in these moments, is not retreat. It's a litmus test. The quiet moment that reveals who can match them and who can only mirror them. And if they sense you can't hold your footing here, they won't even risk the next part. Because the third reason? That's where everything personal is at stake. Reason 3. They guard the inner citadel. Beneath all of this lies the most guarded truth. Every deep intuitive has an inner architecture. A private world built over years from values, meaning, and hard-won clarity. Letting someone in is not just about spending time together. It's about granting access to that inner citadel. Carl Jung described introversion as a turning inwards of the libido, whereby a negative relation of subject to object is expressed. Here, libido doesn't mean sexual drive. It means the general psychic energy of the personality. For these introverted personality types, that inward turn is not avoidance, it's maintenance. After an intense interaction, their dominant inner world, whether it's shaped by introverted intuition in INFJs and INTJs, introverted feeling in INFPs, or introverted thinking in INTPs, needs time to integrate what just happened. And here's where their auxiliary function quietly steps in to help. INFJs and INTJs use external judging, which are, respectively, extroverted feeling and extroverted thinking, to organize what fits. INFPs and INTPs use extroverted intuition to explore new possibilities the interaction revealed. Without this withdrawal, their internal structure would lose clarity and their boundaries would blur. Stepping back is not rejection. It's how they keep their inner world intact, so that when they do open the door, they can offer all of themselves without losing themselves in the process. And this is the one reason they will never apologize for. After exploring these 3 reasons, it becomes clear that their retreat isn't a mystery at all. It's a deliberate act. From the outside, it can look like hesitation, fear, or even rejection. But most of the time, it's none of those things. It's discernment, the awareness that real connection needs space to breathe, that it doesn't survive on constant closeness, but on the right rhythm between closeness and space. And sometimes the step back now is the only reason it will last later. So if someone like this has ever stepped away from you, remember, it's not always distance from you. It may be space to protect the depth you share. And if you've been the one to pull away, now you know. It's not because you're hard to love. It's because your love runs deep enough to need oxygen. If you feel that in your bones, tell me in the comments. I'm built deep. And if you're ready to keep walking this path with me, through the patterns, the paradoxes, and the quiet truths most people never see, subscribe now. The next video is waiting for you. Take care, Rare Mind.